trip, right? Very soon.
I need to draw some money, but the ATM could only take a certain amount, so mine is like a few times above the amount. So I need to physically go into a bank. And then when I went into the bank, an old gentleman won my card. I was asking him, why do you need my card? Okay, so he took my card and slot it into something and give me a queue number, and then something that looks like a iPad like 30 years ago. Asked me to key in how much I need to draw, and then whatever thing, and then can you please hold on to this and wait for your turn? I'm like, why do I need to deal with you in the first place? So anyhow, I waited for like 15 minutes, and then the girl called me, and I had to bring this device to her, and then she asked me, okay, can you please key in your PIN number on this device? And then, okay, wait a while, and then I waited again until she gave me the money, and there's no receipt. I'm like, no receipt? He said, no. Okay, can you please update my passport? So I need to update my passport to see what's going on in my bank. So yeah, that's the stupid Japanese bank system. But
so what you're saying is there's lots of opportunity for fintechs in Japan.
Yes, and lots of
That's what you're saying.
for mistakes too, and lots of opportunity for me to.
Entrepreneurs are getting excited as soon as you say things like that. That's what I love about entrepreneurship. People look at these things and they kind of go, I got that, and then they go for it.
So Richard Branson went into space, or did he?
That's a good question. Is it 80 kilometers or 100 kilometers?
I know this is
the line.
The fun Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson game of defining space, and then Elon Musk is just laughing at himself silly, although he's not riding his own rockets to the International Space Station. But in fairness, he is sending people to the International Space Station. But people have mixed emotions about Virgin Galactic. But I guess it will serve its main function of space tourism, or the feeling of being in space and looking down at the planet and having what appears to be a truly life-changing experience, and in perhaps a safer way than Blue Origin does. Although Blue Origin is different in that I wondered if somebody can comment if they're going to be able to do international travel much faster than, because if they can properly exit into space and allow the Earth rotation and then come down in another controlled location, doing that kind of, around the world travel in, 40 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that they're going up high enough to facilitate that, which I think is, Virgin Galactic's end game really after the tourism thing is making those 12-hour intercontinental flights, bringing them down to 1.5 hours.
Right. And that is interesting.
SpaceX has a good, if you do Googling on this, there's tons of stuff, but SpaceX has a good animation on this somewhere about
that video is amazing.
Yeah, going from Tokyo. I love their animations, actually. That's kind of how they visualize stuff. But just going from, I think, New York to China, Shanghai. And then this idea of putting, so it kind of does this, goes out into space, goes across, comes down, but it comes down on sea, and then they've got this little train that goes out into the sea, and that could happen. And I really hope that I can try something that out for international travel before my life is up. It's quite good.
Okay,
it can happen, but obviously this is an obvious statement, but the system that Galactic have got, you can use existing runways, which is that's the attractive thing of it. If they can get the system working, that they don't need landing pads out at sea away from potential crash areas and whatnot, etc., etc. Just modify existing airports to use this. So, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question on this. Any concern about space debris, especially as we take this up? We're talking about the environment here in the U.S. On Earth, but what about up in orbit and everything like that?
I don't know.
I know NASA and all of them have some stuff on that. So what's the solution to that? Any solution?
At the height that Virgin Galactic went to, there's nothing there because it's. So you could see if you were looking at the telemetry, for instance, as soon as the boosters cut off, the deceleration.
There is something which Elon Musk has been referring to about his one of his ships being able to gather up debris.
We
I'm not too sure about it,
we had an article
but
about a week
maybe
ago of
Yeah, there
a
was a headline. Yeah,
solar powered glider that carries a net behind it that can grab up space junk, because space junk doesn't have any friction in the vacuum of space. So you can just get a big net and just scoop it all up, and you can grab up endless amounts, just limited by the amount of mass you can carry in your net. It's not really a function of weight. I guess the difficult bit is controlling that it drops back into the ocean. And so now you've, got a bunch of space junk back in the ocean. And I guess as long as it's in the net, it's retrievable. So
another thing to take into calculus when you try to catch space debris is that they usually have a very, very, very high velocity, and we talk about 13 kilometers per second and such. And you need to match that speed perfectly, else you will make a tiny little hole in your net every time you try to catch something, because these guys go by faster than sound. All of them, you end up.
Okay, so let's start with the big news, and then whatever time we have left, we will get into the more interesting tweets that everyone's sending in. And so the biggest news at the moment is that 5 former Kaseya, well, let me start here. Kaseya is the company that was at the heart of this big ransomware attack that apparently there's been 1,500 businesses this month and counting. And workers say Kaseya ignored warnings about key vulnerabilities yet again. We had a cybersecurity firm, I recall it was from Switzerland, who found some vulnerabilities in the days before this big ransomware attack, and they warned Kaseya, and Kaseya acknowledged it and apparently started working on it. And now 5 former Kaseya employees say they have warned the company about its lax security practices and were laid off or quit as Kaseya failed to address the issues. Ouch. And that opens them up for some big, lots of lawsuits, especially being based in the US, where we love to sue, especially when you did something stupid that hurt my business economically. I'm not going to sue you, and it's your fault. And now we've got the receipts. If these 5 individuals are willing to testify in court cases, and then you've got a big class action lawsuit on your hands of 1,500 businesses that can say you were warned about these vulnerabilities and you didn't fix them, and so you're responsible.
But if this was, if legislation came out where this was changed to acts of terrorism, then doesn't that also open them up to, some of the leaders of this company, management of this company being open to jail time, etc., regardless of the lawsuits? Jail time for...
No, I don't think there would be any potential jail time out of this.
Okay.
Even if this attack was considered an act of terrorism, the Kaseya is not itself the attacker. They're the building that was attacked, metaphorically, and so they didn't have proper.
Not paying attention to it, not alerting anyone.
Right. Well, no, they didn't know they were going to be attacked. They just knew that there was, they had left a key in a keyhole somewhere. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to try and understand the legislature around it a little bit. Okay.
From an American perspective, they would be potentially responsible for, they could be found guilty of being responsible for the damages that their customers, dealt with economically. If you could prove you were economically victimized by this, which I imagine some of those 1,500 will easily be able to do. You'll have to have proof of kind of injury, so to speak. But
Tyler, there is also a credit system in Europe. So for my companies and multiple of our top suppliers got affected by Kaseya. So I had a hell of a week last week and so far going on. And we have credit system, like if your service is down and our servers are down and the trading is getting impacted across Europe. So they have to give us, the company, there are contractual obligation to pay them. So they are going to pay a huge amount of money to all the suppliers who had literally went down.
It totally depends on what the agreement, the signed contract between Kaseya and their clients say, and that could vary based on countries, but generally Kaseya's contracts would say all that everything's relates back to U.S. laws, even if you're doing business in India and we are based in the U.S. and our service agreement is only applicable to U.S. laws, and any disagreements will be dealt with. And this is where it gets really interesting, is lately big apps, for example, it used to be that companies only had dozens or maybe, maybe 100 or 200 customers. And now we're getting into these apps like Kaseya that have thousands of customers. This is kind of new in the past, due to software, that you can have a software as a service where, for example, Dropbox has millions of customers, paying customers, right? And so the question becomes, if there is a big problem due to some kind of security, imagine this was Dropbox and it would just replace Kaseya with Dropbox. Dropbox was warned by former employees. Dropbox did nothing. And now all of your stuff disappears, right? And we're talking millions of people. Now, what these companies like Dropbox and software as a service, people making software for businesses that have thousands and tens of thousands and maybe even millions of customers, what they do is they're very, very careful to make sure they put in that if there is a problem, that it's dealt with in arbitration in ways that would prevent class action lawsuits. So it forces you as an individual to come and resolve it out of the courts. You're not going to be able to go to court. You're not going to be able to sue them. Actually, you have to go through this third-party arbitration system, which, coincidentally, they, as the software, have gone to this same arbitrator, which is like a fake court, if you want to think of it that way. And it's essentially a business that makes the decision of who's right and who's wrong. But who do you think they're going to be more favorable to? The company who they've worked with every day, 10 times every day for 5 years, or you as the user that they've never heard of, and you're just, the 10th person today, every day, 365 days a year. And so you start to understand how the company starts to build a relationship with because they picked that company as the company who does the arbitration, and they have a good relationship with them, and you don't. So it gets a little sticky. So, second biggest headline, Twitter names resident grievance officer for India and publishes a compliance report meeting 2 key requirements under India's new IT rules. The question is, how long before this new officer is jailed because they're responsible for everything that's happening in Twitter? And who would have been crazy enough to take such a role, knowing that, or did Twitter make it clear to this new person that they are going to be physically responsible for any possible crazy thing anyone in India says on their platform? Because there's been no indication yet that Twitter has regained its platform protections. And Vinay, here on stage, I thank you for sending in a photo from your TV. I take it you're in India, and you sent in a photo from your TV where in India it said breaking news. Twitter, adds a new grievance officer in India. So I guess this is making big news on even on TV. Mainstream TV journalists are covering this story. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so absolutely, Tyler. And in fact, there was some news this morning. I was just talking to someone in Delhi. I'm in Bangalore, by the way. And these were the preconditions for them to resubmit the paperwork to get their intermediary status. So maybe he won't go to jail, but or maybe he will. But there's some more paperwork that they need to resubmit, and then they will be considered to get that intermediary status protection that they lost. So a couple of their sponsors and some of the big customers, and I know one of their biggest clients, Twitter's biggest clients, had basically said that if you guys don't do this, we'll pull the money. We won't work with you guys. So this was really a financial decision that I personally believe that Twitter took. This is Vinay, and I'm done speaking.
Yeah. Well, interesting to see how this will shake out.
Weren't there two headlines? There was a chief compliance officer first, and then there was a grievance officer. Because I saw two separate headlines.
Yes.
A compliance officer and a grievance officer.
Yeah, the main headline.
There's a whole team of guys, I think, that's being hired.
Well, it's small, but the two main roles are basically the resident grievance officer, as they call it, and then a CEO, or what they call a GD, general director, or director general. But the big news and the more legally interesting news is the resident grievance officer, who is A, a resident and on the ground, and B, deals with the grievances of the state. Similar to what the Kremlin is now requiring for all of these social networks in Russia. And they do need to make these reports.
There was a third headline.
Yeah.
There was a third one which said that Twitter would comply with everything required, and this was a very unclear one, which was Twitter would comply with all requests of state.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Twitter today makes money as an ad network. How Twitter makes money, think about this for a second. Twitter's history in India has been based on their business, which is international, which is somebody, you have a bunch of Twitter users, and then you have people who want to advertise something on Twitter, and once in a while you'll see a tweet that says promoted tweet. Twitter makes its money, the vast majority of its money, from those promoted tweets. And I can make an ad targeting, all kinds of interesting demographic characteristics. I can target people geographically. I can target by age, by sex, by all kinds of interesting variables, and make an ad for people who only follow Cal on Twitter, for example, people who only follow Lakeisha. You get quite creative. And people who have tweeted the word chocolate, who follow Cal, who live in California, who are under the age of 46, who are women, who are, single, who are, you see what I'm saying? That's Twitter. That's their ad network. And that's the bulk of their revenue today. But that is about to change fundamentally, because Twitter is now about to roll out social commerce on Twitter, where people are going to have videos, and they already have the ability to do videos. You can tweet a video or a photo, and in that photo, the products in that photo will be clickable and buyable. And if somebody uploads a video, the items or products in that video will be clickable and buyable. And then there will be live streams, and the person in that live stream is going to tell you, hey, I've got 5 of these left. Buy now. Click the buy button right here inside of this tweet. So when that e-commerceification of Twitter happens, now they have a whole different business model. The first one still exists, but the new one is potentially far bigger. And that's why, if they were only existing on their previous business model, they would still do everything India tells them to do. This is not a surprise. Twitter had a very simple choice. Either do what India says or get out. It's super simple, but it was complex for Twitter, because some of their employees don't agree with that. Some of their employees are saying, get out. We don't play games with countries who don't want our version of free speech, or what we feel is fair. And never mind the fact we've never been there or have any understanding of the local culture or anything like that. That's not what, So it gets very difficult, because the senior leadership, we saw Twitter has done campaigns internally where the team members get together, and, you get 20% of the company saying, you do this or else. Spotify had it too when they had Joe Rogan. You had a huge percentage, you had a significant percentage of team members get together and say, no, we don't like Joe Rogan. we know you just paid $100 million for it, but we don't like it, so we're going to leave. We don't want to work at this company anymore if you don't do this. And it's employee activism is what it is. And in America, we've got a whole bunch of this, activism on all kinds of issues. And it's a sticky tightrope that the companies have to walk. And this gets back to other headlines we read 3 months ago. And now
one last thing here, Tyler.
No, you just cut me off right at the critical moment. It's like, sorry, we're literally about to climax, and you're like, baby, let's pause.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Now you know why. The headlines from 3 months ago about Coinbase telling their employees, we will not have political discussions at work. That was a huge headline for about a week. That Coinbase, a month before the IPO, said, hey, everybody, we got a new thing going on here. You are more than welcome to feel any way you want about any topic on the planet, but we have our own agenda and mission here at Coinbase. And however you feel about dolphins or genders or races or any of those things, you can leave that at home, because at Coinbase, inside these walls, during the time that we are paying you as an employee, while you are on the clock of Coinbase, your feelings about those things should be kept inside of your sweet little beautiful head, because we don't want any of those things detracting from our core mission and focus. And so if you feel that's unfair, that's fine. You can leave. And in fact, we will give you 6 months severance pay to make that transition easy for you. And it's been nice knowing you. And you're a lovely person. And thank you for your service. So Coinbase did that. And Coinbase wasn't the only one. What is David DHH's company called? 37 Signals also did it. And both of those companies got an incredible amount of flack from tech journalists for, you're trying to silence your employees and blah, 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 blah. Well, now you see Twitter as an example in a super, super sticky situation, because now you've opened yourself up to potential employee activism mutinies of a sort of, now you've got 30% of your company saying, hey, boss, yeah, we, the engineering team that run this boat, the engines, we're leaving if you make that decision. And Coinbase is not going to have that problem. And their company cannot be taken over internally by a political coup within their own company, because they've addressed this issue preemptively. Twitter has not. So that's one way to look at it. So it's a very, I don't think people realized Coinbase saw what the kinds of scenarios that Twitter is now getting itself into preemptively, and Twitter's not alone. This, if left unchecked, Apple's going through it with this work remote thing. Google just jumped into it in this Google going with the team remote thing. There's all kinds of issues now where post-COVID employees feel empowered to get together in a kind of soft union mutinies and make their collective strength felt against senior leadership. May, are you trying to jump in, or you're clapping?
Yeah, I was, because you brought up a really fascinating topic, because I think Chetna probably could shed some light on some of the HR legalities about this. But I mean, 2 points. One, when you work for an organization, at the end of the day, you're still an employee of the organization. So there is a little bit of an inauthenticity there, because I remember back in the days when I worked in a company, I actually chose for the company based on the freedoms and what the company, like how much it aligned with my values, right? That's one. And I think that that's something that's been a little bit diluted now with this sort of, with COVID, with the digital nomadism that goes on, with the remote working. I think there's a lot of loose, gray area now, because it's almost, I feel like it's like people don't know their employer or corporate boundaries. And I think that's something that I'm noticing heavily as of late, more and more and more. Second, I would wonder what the impact would have on unionizations of new versions of unionizations, right? Because unions were there back in the days because of similar things, but back in the 70s or 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was different. But now, do you feel like they might also bring another level of unionization to the current working world? And my third point is, just after having seen what I saw about 7 hours ago in Cuba and Havana, it's really scary as well, because you now have an island like Cuba that has been basically shut off their internet in various places in Havana, where towns are really suffering majorly, and there's a major crisis there right now. And there is a conversation by journalists, because I was in a room with them last night really late, that now they have to almost pacify the government just to get PPE and certain supplies, because it's a communist government. And the challenge is, if the people revolt and they go libertad, 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 it's like, where's the delicate balance of people sort of like being like, whoa, 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 we also still need them for some of the things that the people are not getting. And they also hold the keys to opening the doors in the oceans for people to come in and help the Cuban people. So it's a very, very sticky situation, because in companies, if people start speaking their opinion in context of a company, you're still an employee of that company. And I think this is why, Tyler, remember back in the day, they say you don't talk about sex, politics, or religion at any cocktail party. I think that we've lost our boundaries about talking sex, religion, and politics in areas where we have to be very cognizant that we may be stepping in some thin ice when we start having those conversations where we're not fully aware of who we're conversing with.
Thanks, Emma. Somebody else was trying to jump in there.
This is Michelle speaking.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi. I think I've sort of made this point earlier, a couple of months ago, when this topic came up, but I'm not necessarily agreeing with the fact that those issues should be left at home. And I took the example of the Google boycott, when they wanted to build, like drones for the army or be part of certain projects.
Great point.
Where employees say they're not comfortable
Amazon,
working in
Amazon, Google and Amazon both have technologies related to the military, especially on the southern border. So there's all kinds of
And the second thing was that the reality is that when you join those companies, you ask those questions around companies' values. And again, what I was saying last time is that we're also individuals before being employees. And I took the example of the Asian hate that happened a couple of months ago. We talked about it at work, because it would have been weird for me to see a colleague going through that and not being able to talk about it. And I think, people choose companies they want to work for based on those things as well. So personally, I wouldn't be comfortable working at a company where those issues are considered non-corporate at all. But meaning that those companies such as Google, Facebook, and maybe Apple also attract talents based on those things. And some people wouldn't have worked for them if they had that con-based stance,
We had a friend of mine jump in. Hey, Ken. A friend of mine named Lisa from Stockholm, who's now the chief experience officer for EY, because she sold her design innovation agency to EY, Ernst & Young, and she's a very brilliant, notable figure in Scandinavia, and one of the people I really look up to, and she just can really see the future in an incredible way. But we were talking to, somebody asked me what I would do in this situation of a difficult decision where you have some of your team members saying they feel a certain way. And let's say it's 20% of them say, hey, boss, we shouldn't do this, or we're quitting. And then I said it's just one of the things I absorbed from Sweden that really seems to be a beautiful process, is they truly democratize the workplace, where you as a company of team members, everyone's considered equal, and they do truly democratic votes. And Lisa jumped on stage and gave a really amazing example of they got a client, which is one of the world's biggest hamburger companies. And yes, you're thinking of the right one. And we're talking lots of millions of dollars. And her agency has about 100 employees. And this is a super significant client. And they one of the people in the she assumed, oh yeah, we're going to do this client, like, great news, hey everybody, great news, guess who we just got as a client? And somebody said, no, we got to vote on it because they are vegan, or there's other issues, about this big hamburger company that, for even, you could even say maybe the person wasn't even vegan, but they were environmentalist, and that, meat is, so anyway, I don't actually know the issue that raised the vote, but they had a vote on it, and more than 50% of the, after hearing each other out in a little kind of very friendly Swedish style of standing court case, everyone made their points, they took the vote, and they ended up turning away the client. And she gave that example of that's how Sweden does things, though. It's like, we as a company are our own little tribe, and we're going to make our decisions as a tribe for the best of the tribe, and it's based on democracy. But in that scenario, if you do have an issue where it's 20%, 25%, 30% of people feel we're not happy about this, as long as people are feeling like they're being heard and their vote is counted, you see what I'm saying? Those 20%, you know what? We hear you. We understand you. Your vote matters. Your vote's being added onto the scoreboard of making this decision for the company. But as it stands, here's what we feel going forward. And if there's other issues in the future that anyone else feels, particularly, that we need to bring up to account, everyone's able to bring issues to the table, to the tribe. We all vote on it collectively, respectfully with each other, and we all make the best decisions we can going forward. I suspect that might be a new. It works in Sweden. I'll just say that. So I don't know.
So Tyler, on that model, I guess they're just playing it forward. If you had 10 decisions, right, over a year or 2 years, maybe 5 of them don't go your way, like as an employee, right? But 1 or 2 might. So you over a long term, you get more satisfaction. The question I have to ask, maybe you and the Swedes in the room, is, does that add, and obviously not an issue for some of the successful companies that have come out of there, right? But does that add extra time for decision making that may cause competitive challenges if you have to make a call quickly? I mean, that's one of the reasons people give for a more dictatorial style. In wartime, we've got to make a decision. The technology market is changing so quickly, we have to make decisions fast. I do know that people say that, so I'm just curious.
But check this
how
out.
They make that work.
They're not even thinking in that mind frame. They're thinking in the mind frame of, if people are silenced and forced to accept decisions that they don't agree with without having a real vote about it, they no longer perform optimally at work. And we want to create an environment where people perform optimally at work. And to perform optimally, you need to feel that your opinion matters to the company, equal to everybody else's. And in that context, people perform very well, even if their vote, even if their issue didn't win the majority, they still know that their vote is of equal importance to everybody else's, and we're all on the same team. We're all going to make the best decisions that we can. And I imagine if you didn't, out of 10, and you didn't win any of the 10, you might realize my values don't align with the rest of the tribe, and you might go find a new tribe. But there isn't going to be a really rough coup happening anytime soon within the company, because we've all agreed, we're it's a collaborative, consensus-driven approach. But
actually,
the key,
I'm going to jump into.
Yeah, of course you can, Vinay. But I just want to emphasize the whole psychology behind this whole approach is creating an environment where people feel positive about going to work every day.
Yeah, I just tweeted to you in TNATW an article about a company in Bay Area that lost 30% of their employees because they were not happy with the decision. And by the way, the work I do in process facilitation is exactly that: getting groups in a team room together. And it doesn't have to be consensus, but just getting, as you said, getting people in a room together, making sure everybody's heard, given the space to voice their opinion, and they'll reach a decision. Some decisions are consensus, some are majority, some are leader driven, but they want to have a say in that. And that's an increasing kind of work. And I work with a lot of startups, tech, and that's what defines culture today.
Mm-hmm.
This is Vinay. I'm done speaking.
Okay, Vinay, thanks.
The challenge of of years and years of consulting work that I gave up a while ago when I joined Best Buy, and even the consultants that would try and sell to us different things. One of the traditional consulting selling model, like I'm talking about the big guys, and is we will get to execution really fast, right? Even McKinsey would like say, okay, this is a strategy, let's just get it down. This is your committee that sets it up, and then they go into a whole change management. This whole word, change management, this whole orthodoxy around you can manage change and manage resistance. Where that comes from, that entire orthodoxy comes from exactly what you're probing on, Tyler, is the ability by which for leaders to do make the decisions the right way in the first place. Because most of that resistance comes from employees, right? Just not doing things fast enough or explicitly sabotaging a project. So the consultants love that because then they come in and they put their little facilitators. I don't mean you, sir, Vinay. I'm just saying generally. They put their little facilitators and they will help you manage the resistance. But you could have avoided it if you did what, Tyler, you're alluding to there. In the first place, you took people along with you. The challenge with that is also like just doing it, in a more systemic and consistent way, so that if once or twice it doesn't go the employee's way, they know and they trust the leadership that next time it will. But I think as the models change, we may need less of that kind of rip-off. I would say, I can say it because I used to sell that stuff at KPMG and Accenture. Rip-off consulting model where you're basically trying to help people manage resistance, right? And it's huge, millions and millions of dollars of things, and employees get pissed off with that too, right? So anyway,
I'd agree with you, Cal, because I've worked with consultants who've come in and sold that approach and actually left a bit of a mess when they've left. And I think there are organisations also. I agree with Tyler's approach where you consult from the work with the employees and get some insights and work with that and hold focus groups, things like that, to get them involved from the outset. And so I think that's a better way of managing change, more proactive, so they're involved in the process, and it creates a sense of belonging. But in order to do that, you have to have some psychological safety where people feel safe speaking up and being open, and that's a big piece around the culture. And then and then going into this point of this democratizing, I think that works provided that people are shooting for the same thing. If you've got groups that, I don't know, environments that have a bias towards certain races or belief system, and they don't come out in day to day, but they come out in confidential surveys, that could it could change the direction of things. So I think that you have to have the right environment in order to create that. But it's a wonderful approach, I think, to decision making for business to have. But you have to have the safety and all these other things in place in the culture before it happens.
Thank you, Chetna. I want to jump into the other big headlines because we have a 2-hour.
May I just make my last comment?
Go ahead,
on
Faraz.
that I wanted to try and.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted your feedback on this one because I remember India had been talking about the Chinese noose around them, with Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh posing a threat on account of China's alliance with them. So with Twitter now now basically giving India the green light on anything and everything that they want, with agreeing with the state laws. Well, in terms of setting precedents, I would feel that Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh would now want something similar short term in the future with Twitter. And this sets a precedent because Twitter would be recognized as a major brainwashing tool for the population in terms of, or control tool for the population. So, I mean, what are your thoughts there? I'm thinking this is
thank you for raising the issue.
The end of Twitter.
It's every country will now have much more control over social networks within their geographies. And that's an incredibly important. We're going to watch how that plays out in the next few months. We're going to see headlines. We're going to see crazy headlines that are hard to imagine right now. Yep.
Yeah, so just so you guys know, Twitter was the holdout because Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram had already appointed all the grievance officers. So Twitter was the holdout, and now there's no more holdouts.
We've got Daniel, I missed you before. Daniel's a Swedish Texan That's an amazing combination, by the way. But welcome, Daniel.
Morning. Yeah, thank you. I was just going to add quickly, since I've been doing some of both startups and non-startups where we've worked with culture and values in the Swedish companies. And I think just to add some context to where Swedes get to vote, so to speak, not necessarily the case of Lisa's company. I remember when she talked about that, but we've had the instance where we've asked all the employees about what values and culture they want with the company and what the company should represent, et cetera. Obviously, there's a goal of going, et cetera, but still, values and culture have been coming from all the employees. When you've had that situation, it's kind of tough to overrule, so to speak, from management if you would take on a client that totally goes against those values that all the employees have set together. So that just adds some context. Whereas if you've never had that, obviously it's a lot easier, of course. And which Cal, for example, it doesn't mean that for every client you have to vote, do we want to take them on? But if somebody recognizes, okay, we got a possible client, their values are totally contradictory with ours, or they are doing things out there in the world which is really bad, again, and it goes contradictory to our value, which is this, then they may bring it up to, okay, we shouldn't work with these guys.
So check this out. Thank you, Daniel, for the additional context there. Faraz, your point leads perfectly into the third largest article of today at this very moment. The number 3 article, as judged by the number of tweets and retweets, the headline is about Vietnam's influencer army wages information war on Facebook. Now watch how this headline relates to our last point, or especially Faraz's last point, where now that Twitter's complying with India, they've really opened themselves up to kowtow to any regime. And he mentioned Pakistan, where, he's, I think you were born in Pakistan, so that's a very fair comparison. But here it is about Vietnam, where thousands of army units are fighting wrong views. And there's a name for this new force called Force 47. State media reveals network of Force 47 Facebook groups. Vietnam threatens to block Facebook over censorship requests. Facebook calls Force 47 group following Reuters investigation. YouTube says 9 channels removes 9 channels over spam policy. And in Vietnam, where the state is fighting a fierce online battle against political dissent, social media influencers are most likely to be soldiers than celebrities. Force 47 is a Vietnamese army's online information warfare unit. Consists of thousands of soldiers who, in addition to their normal duties, are tasked with setting up, moderating, and posting on pro-state Facebook groups to correct wrong views online, quote unquote wrong views, or views that don't conform with the state. And so they're using social media and their social media army, quite literally, to create, to correct wrong views online, views that don't comply with the state. And so they're using these social medias as a sort of, in a semi-weaponized way, because it's a numbers game, and they can effectively outnumber. And so this plays right into Faraz's point. Before, we were assuming, the state is not themselves going to play an active role in creating content on these networks. They're just going to request that, this and this and that be removed. Well, Vietnam's very likely to be next, even before Pakistan. Reading this article, I can imagine the conversations that Vietnam is having with Facebook saying, hey, we happen to notice that you're complying with everything India wants to do. Listen, Vietnam's 100 million people, by the way. That's no small country. And we want you to do the same here. And you can start tomorrow, or you can leave. So that's where it gets really interesting. And this comes down to the timing of this, because for this to be effective, they need to start it now, especially in Southeast Asia, because Facebook just announced, and in Asia's ahead of the US on this, where companies are starting to be built on top of Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp, so that if you do this friction, this battle where Vietnam is now, you bet this is a super simple prediction. You're going to have Vietnam saying, hey, why do we have this army where we're trying to battle all of these wrong views when we can just tell Facebook to algorithmically remove these wrong views, which of course they can do. So, and monitor the accounts, and Facebook is, they're going to give tools to Vietnam to properly monitor all of what they feel are the bad actors and silence what they're saying if it's not, quote unquote, the right view, or if it is the wrong view. And let's bring up, with all respect to Facebook tried to go into China. They made an incredible, remarkably sincere effort to enter China. And Mark speaks Mandarin, right? And he met with Xi Jinping in China, and really you can understand why Facebook wanted to go into China. That's not a difficult thing to figure out. So, but to go into China, goddamn well you're going to need tools to give to China to police all of the content on Facebook. And if you don't have those tools available, China's going to laugh at you and say, no thanks. Like, this is even before you even have the meeting with China, you're going to have to say, oh, of course, we've got all the tools you could ever want about removing any content you don't like, about policing the content 100,000% in 20 ways to Friday. So no doubt they have that ability to give those moderation tools to the state to do themselves, like Vietnam is now obviously going to ask for. So clearly they technically can do it. Vietnam knows they can. Vietnam's using an army of people to put in content that they like. And the question is, how long before Vietnam's able to use those tools that Facebook clearly had intended for China to police the unfriendly content inside of Vietnam. So here it is. And, but on the other side, you've got Vietnam's not unique. China also has armies of people creating content as well inside of all kinds of social apps. And it's going to be very interesting. To your point, there's going to be interesting political implications that we can't yet really imagine. What's up, Carl?
Just quickly on the timing. Sorry, I'll be very quick. Just quickly on the timing. There's also it's blood in the water, right? Like, you had this massive sort of corporation, or this series of oligarchies that were, infinitely powerful and unreachable and up high there on the mountain. And then as each country is watching them and going, hold on a minute, now the EU is attacking them, and hold on a minute, now the UK, and now even the US, and now China, and they're kicked out of India, and there's blood in the water. So they see, if you cut a man and show that he bleeds, you're no longer afraid of him. And I feel like this is a little bit of that.
Karam?
So just quickly wanted to update in terms of the Pakistan. Pakistan already has the precedence in terms of actually blocking the YouTube. So that happened back in 2012, and the YouTube was banned for almost 5 years. And at that time, they actually came up with this, deployed the operation of a national level URL filtering and blocking system along the lines of Golden Shield, what China has. So pretty much the capability is there. It's just like tomorrow, if somebody doesn't actually come in line with whatever they say on the governmental level, it's just going to be pressing a button and here you go. So yeah, there's already a precedence there. Like for 5 years, there was no YouTube in Pakistan, but then it restored. Yeah.
I'm got to send out this article about, we read this before, this Vietnamese army force, I think, was first noticed a week or so ago, and we touched on it briefly, but interesting to see that it's back today as the third biggest headline of today. And I just want to scan it one more time because there's some interesting points that they point out.
Adam, may I say something?
Go ahead,
while you're doing that?
Yeah.
So, Pakistan's one thing, and then you've got Bangladesh and the other allies of China that they've, I guess, kind of strategically placed around India, right?
Well, yeah, that's not a coincidence. Yeah, they've got Pakistan on one side, now they got Myanmar on the other side, yeah.
And
Sri Lanka at the bottom. By the way, exactly. Faraz, just to highlight that that's not a coincidence, it's called the String of Pearls. The ports there's a port in Myanmar, there's a port in Sri Lanka, and a port in Pakistan that allow China to use the waterways surrounding India. And the name for it is called String of Pearls. And it goes through Thailand, it goes down the Strait of Malacca, around Singapore, all the way.
There's all of them. I know exactly what you're referring to. But what I'm trying to say here is, but imagine now that India's done it, okay, and now you have, let's say, Pakistan and the others come in and they start. Imagine the power that this gives a tech giant. Like, imagine the power that Jack Dorsey has in his hands, and now he can actually negotiate amongst these nations. He's done it for one. He's giving them permission. He actually has some negotiation power here. He can play these nations against each other.
Right. No, my point is that in the right now, in June, July, this summer begins the gold rush of mom and pop shops and even street food stall sellers and even fishermen doing their business now via social media, which even Lakeisha has shown examples in Thailand recently of fishermen. We've highlighted examples of farmers, and this is popping off as we speak in Asia right now. So Facebook today is in Twitter and TikTok are communication channels of content channels of communication. They are very, very soon about to become your actual shopping mall, your actual main street, the heart of your commerce of your country is in the future going to happen on these in the very near future is going to happen on these platforms. So what happens when today, yes, Vietnam can say, and India could say, hey, Twitter, do this or else. Hey, Facebook, do this or else. A year from now, when there's 1 million, maybe even 10 million mom and pop shops doing their business primarily on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, what happens then when India says, hey, Facebook, do this? And Facebook says, do you realize we have 15 million mom and pop shops doing their bit? We're going to close down 15 million mom and pop stores if you tell us to leave. And then Facebook will, at that point, have a big upper hand in that negotiation. And then
hey, Tyler, this is Rob. Do you think that if I was a nation, I would be trying to create a parallel program?
A domestic,
Twitter and Facebook.
Exactly, Robert, you did it. There it is. Now we've played it out in exactly right, because if these nations are paying attention, they realize what I just said, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat are all going to e-com, and Pinterest has already started it as well. They're e-commerceifying, and they're going to be competing to get every mom and pop flower shop, cake shop, shoe shop, etc. on their platform. And once they are on those platforms, within not so long a time, the digital e-commerce shop will be selling more than the brick and mortar store, and they will no longer really need the brick and mortar store. And then that's where it gets really interesting, because now Facebook or whoever, Snapchat, TikTok, has an incredible amount of influence in that negotiation when the government says, hey, take down this content, and Facebook says, no, what are you going to do about it? You're going to shut down 20 million mom and pop stores? You're going to kick us out? I don't think you got the balls, Modi.
So Tyler, as they're localizing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, let me finish to put the little cherry on top of that. Modi sees that move coming, and that's why Modi's going to say, we need the battle is today that we need the local versions of Twitter, which is Coup. We need the local versions of these social media apps, which are happening. TikTok now has 3 strong players in India, which Vinay, you could probably name the new local Indian versions of TikTok that are popping up. And
the biggest one is a company called ShareChat. Huge.
Right.
They're adding about 1.5 million users a month.
Right. So my point is India feels far more comfortable with a local Indian version of TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and all of these apps, because it avoids that incredibly impossible mutiny-like scenario where if it's a domestic local company that they control economically and politically, that company's not going anywhere. Right? I mean, that company can't say, we're going to move to where exactly? What do you mean? I mean, you're stuck. You're India. You're an Indian company with Indian companies on your platform. So it's a much safer scenario. And that's why I've been predicting now for about a month, countries are going to wake up and realize, we don't want international tech companies running our apps. We want our own domestic apps that can become unicorns, especially now with the e-commerceification of these consumer-facing apps, because nearly every consumer-facing app, even Tinder, could e-commerceify, where I could buy flowers for the date, just to show this, person who I'm pursuing, that I think they're awesome. I might be able to buy them something to prove that, that I actually have some, whatever. So I predict that's coming.
Just quickly,
I don't know. I also just wanted to say one thing.
Just quickly, just give me 10 seconds.
Marie, hold on. Let Marie,
go ahead.
Marie, and then Karam, go ahead.
Just one thing I would say is the reason also why they care to keep social platforms there and for all the social commerce is because you need to remember they don't get any tax from them running the advertising. They will, however, be able to tax the sales of products run through those social channels. So for countries, it's very important to have platforms that can encourage and fuel more of this economic growth, because then they can tax it. So that is kind of something that I'm thinking about, as to why they would want to keep this whole social commerce going as well.
Sure. Karam?
So I don't know whether you saw that like a couple of days ago. I couldn't join back yesterday and the day before, so I tweeted that Indian social e-commerce deal share raises 144 million, is international expansion. So here we go. That's linked back to what you were saying.
Say it. I didn't quite get your point. Could you say it again?
Oh, okay. So what you were saying that, indigenous platform actually coming from India, actually expanding, not just in India, but overseas, and raised 144 million, the Series D round. So, coming in, actually replacing Facebook, and having like a, parallel structure. So, I mean, this is not a small amount, raising.
So what I would say to that is that my sense is that the platforms themselves, the international platforms, are already, a step ahead. And I say that because living in Thailand, I understand that we're one of the pilot markets for the Shop Now feature. And so I've received bakers from Singapore, trying to sell me cakes. I received a Shop Now request from a dressmaker in Australia. So I think that as the localization process is taking place, it seems to me, just based on my experience, that they're also regionalizing it as well, so that it's not going to be exclusively domestic. And I think that will be the checkmate. And there'll probably be another point after that, right?
That's
so they can say, if you want to go ahead and lock your markets to only, customers within India, and you don't want to sell to customers in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Thailand, go right ahead. But we have the edge on the international and the regional markets.
Yeah, I just want to add, by the way, even these local companies, there's an article about Google is going to invest in ShareChat, right? And even in Ku, the Chinese investors are out, but in their next series of funding, there's Facebook investments and probably Google that's looking to invest as well. They've already indicated an interest to invest. So it's becoming a hodgepodge of ownership and stuff like that. But in most of these companies in India, a lot of the original Chinese seed funding or Series A funding is being replaced by the likes of Google and others.
Okay, keeping on the post. So the other, so there's a quote about the Vietnamese army force on Facebook, where it says founding leader of Ho Chi Minh Mark. These developments unfolding in Vietnam are scary and have expanded with impunity, says Asian Pacific Policy Council of Internet Rights Group Access Now. We are witnessing the creation of a reality where people are not safe to speak freely online and where there's no concept of individual privacy. Okay. The other big the fourth biggest article of today at the moment is about a startup called PodSwap, a startup offering a battery replacement service for Apple's AirPods, because there is a battery inside of your AirPods case that eventually wears out. And it's a great example of why we need these new right to repair legislation, especially with regard to Apple devices, because the first generation Apple AirPods are getting to the point now where the batteries are hitting that sort of critical phase of no longer being as useful as they once were. And if you do a very cheap battery swap, then it is. And it's an incredibly simple thing to do, or it could be. Anyway, the other big article at the moment is, let's see, there's Krebs Samuel Group launches ransomware crowdsourced. There's now a crowdsourced ransomware payment tracker, and the site has already tracked $32 million in ransom payments this year alone. And there's the analysis of the first half of 2021. Private funding for cybersecurity companies has reached $9 billion, up more than double from the same first half of 2020, and eclipsed a record total and it's already passing all of 2020. Cybersecurity startups raised $7.8 billion, and they've already raised $9 billion in the first half of this year. So it's cybersecurity companies are clearly one of the benefactors of all of this ransomware hacking. And Financial Times has a new headline that after the Didi crackdown, China-based fitness app Keep, podcasting platform called Himalaya, and medical data analytics startup LinkDoc have all paused their U.S. IPO plans. SoftBank and Tencent are the backers of Keep. What a surprise. That another... Wow. Oh, this actually helps us figure something out. Interesting coincidence that SoftBank was behind another one of these Chinese tech companies that were planning to IPO in the very near future. I wonder if that's a coincidence.
What do you think this has to do with the statement Japan made about stepping up to defend Taiwan in the event of an attack?
I think that is the point I want to make here is when Jack Ma's IPO for Ant Financial got shut down, I posited the wild conspiracy theory that maybe I asked our friend David, who was on stage a minute ago. Is David still with us? He's not. But let's ping him. That's the beauty of Clubhouse, isn't it? David Chang. Where are you, David? Bear with me for 2 seconds.
He was here until a while ago. By the way, LinkDoc is also backed by Alibaba.
Hold on. Here's David. Let me ping David, because, hear me out here. I threw out the idea that when Jack Ma's Ant Financial IPO got scrapped by the Chinese state, that inspired Didi to do a U.S. IPO quickly so that the investors from SoftBank, Masayoshi-san, could get his money out because he's the largest investor in Didi. And he's also best friends with Jack Ma from Alibaba. And Jack Ma got shut down. His IPO in China got scrapped. And I think Masayoshi saw what happened to Jack Ma and said, shit, I've got other huge investments in China that are all going to get the shit beat out of them in the near future. Let's go IPO them in the US so I can get my money out. So that inspired
David back.
David, you're back. Fantastic. Thank you, Cal. Hey, David, I just saw something that, remember, I had a theory that Didi went to IPO in the US and even went against the regulators' strong insistence that they should pause their US IPO. They said, nah, fuck that. We're going. We are going to jump over the drawbridge. Now that the drawbridge is being lifted, we're going to hop in our car and jump over the drawbridge and over to New York and do our IPO. Because I think Masa from SoftBank, who was the biggest investor, was telling them, hey, if we don't go IPO in the US, my money is going to get locked up in your startup in China. So let's go run over to the US and do an IPO. Now, the headline just came out today that a new startup there's news that a Chinese-based fitness app named Keep has paused their US IPO plans. They were about to IPO. And guess who the big investor was? Again, Masa from SoftBank. What are the odds that there were two, now Didi and Keep, SoftBank invested Chinese tech companies that were planning to IPO in the US around the same time? And I'm willing to bet that Keep announced their IPO plans in the days or weeks after Alibaba's Ant Financial IPO got squashed, just at around the same time that Didi did. So let's try and find, when did Didi announce their plans to IPO in the US, and when did Keep announce their plans to IPO in the US? I bet you they are very near in time, and I bet you they are both shortly after Ant Financial IPO plans got squashed in China. What do you think, David?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Let's find out. Let's see if Tyler's crazy, or let's see if Masa realized, oh shit, China's going to crack down on the big tech companies. I've got a few tech companies that I've invested very heavily in. I need to make sure that I can get my money out. Hey guys, go IPO in the US ASAP, like right now. And that's why Didi just ran out the door. And now this one, Keep, which is also backed by Masa at SoftBank, didn't quite get the car out of the garage fast enough to jump over the drawbridge. And now they're stuck inside, but they're not the only one. There's a couple of others. Himalaya, which is a podcasting platform, and LinkDoc, which is a medical data analytics company. And Cheryl, I think you said that LinkDoc is backed by Alibaba.
Yep.
So Alibaba similarly might have
under Alibaba Health.
Right. So
Tyler.
Yes.
There's a new thing with SoftBank as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just tweeted it. SoftBank-owned Line goes open source to help central banks mint CBDCs. Line Plus wants its platform to meet the demands of different central banks. So the key takeaways in brief: Line Plus has released a blockchain for central banks to issue their own digital currencies. It's currently in talks with several Asian central banks. Mass adoption of CBDCs could be round the corner, but the technology used to achieve them is still disputed. And that's SoftBank's company. That's SoftBank's.
Yes. Line is from Japan, and it's the main messaging app even in Thailand.
Well, maybe now Cheryl will have a better experience with her banking now that this is coming in.
Oh no, fintech can do shit here if the client wants to have cash. It's nothing to do with fintech.
News.
It's a Japanese culture who love to smell cash. That's why I had to go to the bank.
SoftBank in early talks with Massive Army. Line, SoftBank I stake it. Can you read the headline again? I'm not finding it.
I tweeted it, Tyler. So
you and 5,000 other people in the past 20 minutes.
Okay, let me repeat that. So it says SoftBank-owned Line goes open source to help central banks mint CBDCs. Decrypt. Line Plus wants its platform to meet the demands of different central banks. Line Plus has released a blockchain for central banks to issue their own digital currencies. It's currently in talks with several Asian central banks. Mass adoption of CBDCs could be around the corner, but the technology used to achieve them is still being disputed. Line Plus, a South Korean software and tech services corporation owned by Japanese multinational conglomerate SoftBank, has released a blockchain platform to help central banks get their CBDCs off the ground.
It's cool. David, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, well, good luck. I mean, good luck trying to take that business away from all of these central governments, right? I think Line is successful in a few markets globally, and that's probably only Japan, Thailand, and Taiwan. And I think that's probably the extent of their reach. I really doubt large sovereign nations will hand over the keys, not only for CBDC, but even possibly quite unlikely for e-payment which in most countries in the world is a concessionary business.
Yeah, but if states start doing their own CBDCs, what was the conversation we were having with James from MasterCard in the FinTech room over the weekend, Cal? You remember this? And Carl, you were there as well. Ben was there as well. And we were talking about how the cards are now starting to play friendly with crypto and even CBDCs. And as makes sense. But then I don't think it's that hard to imagine that these apps, like the messaging apps, will want to play friendly with CBDCs. They're just going to have to do whatever the government tells them to do, but then the government will have a way to, rather than, for example, in China, China has its own central bank digital currency, the digital yuan, and it uses its own app currently. But I can imagine once it really gets strong adoption, they will then allow Alipay or WeChat Pay to also enable users to exchange this the Chinese digital currency from within their own apps, but in a way that, of course, the government is going to need access to all of that data.
Yeah, I think the discussion from this weekend was just around trying to understand the Visa. It came from the understanding what Visa was doing with the crypto, the alliance they have with 50, or the deal they have with 50, 50 of those companies. So that's where the discussion came from. Then it was about, just one second. Then it was about just how. I think James alluded to the fact that it's in the interest of all the card players just to work with everyone, right? They don't care. And then we had a discussion about whether they took the risk on with a float, and we went to and fro on that.
Yeah, but by the way, now I just found a May's article about Line, and the key word that I missed, which is totally fills in the missing piece in this puzzle, is that Line is going to go open source so that the government will have access to everything within the app, essentially. It's really interesting.
Tyler, this is Shaheen. I have some comment on this.
Yeah.
I think while they're not going to get a big government to adopt their software, they might very well get the smaller ones to do. And it doesn't have to be CBDC. It can be some other government-oriented blockchain thing. For example, tax collection, customs, all sorts of things where governments, and many governments, just don't have the software development capability to do. So this can become the ultimate ABM. You've got 150 countries to target, and obviously the big guys are going to roll their own, just like the big auto companies and the big cloud companies roll their own. But the second tier is not a bad market. Masa's a smart guy, as we know.
Yeah.
So I just looked up the information on Keep. Yep. They just closed early this year, around 10th of January, a Series F round led by Vision Fund and also Hill House Capital. I'm sure you know who they are, right? They're the big, the Chinese.
Which was just weeks before Alibaba got shut down, the IPO. That happened in early February, yeah?
Early Jan, this did.
Oh, so around the same time.
Right after, yeah. And then immediately one day after the news, the press release on this $360 million round led by Vision Fund. The next day there was a press release about potential IPO in the US.
Oh my goodness. Which is bizarre. Why would you announce an IPO a day after announcing this massive new fundraising?
Well, the IPO news was very sort of like potential IPO in sight ? kind of release.
Because SoftBank's investment from the Vision Fund, normally announcements take often a month. Fundraising announcements, like the one Keep did, where they raised money from SoftBank's Vision Fund, those types of fundraising announcements are delayed by weeks.
So I think the one that came out on 10th of January, that was an announcement after they've already closed the round.
Correct.
From everybody.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then
which means the investment might have actually taken place before the Alibaba ant
correct
blow up.
I will bet everything that it did. And by the way, there's usually an amazing amount of investments that close before the Christmas break, like in mid-December.
Exactly. So because most of the execs at the funds actually take the entire, especially in China, they take the entire month of December, January, and early Feb off. So basically the Western holidays plus the Chinese New Year holidays.
Yeah, it's kind of
just gone.
I think that's driven by the fact that Silicon Valley historically has this, December 20th kind of deadline, and a lot of deals get done in early December before people go away for, the traditional holidays. And so I bet that Vision Fund deal closed, the fundraising finished before the holiday break, and then the announcement was made just after, and then the IPO announcement was made the next day. That's really funny.
Most possibly to give some reassurance to their LPs now that they've invested into China, where IPO within China seems murky at best, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was really a call of confidence to the fund's LPs, most likely.
Faraz, are you on stage? This headline about the Vatican honoring of Sheikh Mohammed fills country with pride. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed received the Man of Humanity Award from the Vatican's, and without reading it, I imagine it has something to do with the fact that the UAE now has churches and synagogues and then has made ties with Israel lately, or recognition of Israel, and all of these kinds of things. And that's why the Vatican is giving him this award for kind of.
So there's two things there.
Yeah?
There's one which is the setting up of the Ministry of Tolerance, and of course tolerance for all faiths, all religions, all nationalities, all creeds, all colors, regardless of who, what, when, how. And then the second thing is his personal contribution in terms of humanitarian aid, and the third thing is the national contribution in terms of humanitarian aid to the globe, and more so his personal contributions, which he nor anyone around his circle, nor anyone in the nation ever mentioned until very recently, when it was actually by mistake it just came out. And I think you and I, Tyler, actually once spoke about it most recently, where he himself was sending his own planes in line with some of the planes for the national carriers during COVID to carry patients from some of the lesser developed nations in the world, to carry patients back to field hospitals in the United Arab Emirates, treat them and get them back home. So similar things like that weren't being reported. And have now caught the eye of the Pope and other nations around the world. That's why it's been done.
Cool. Well, let's hopefully that will continue to spread all around there. We covered the Vietnam big story. The other big stories today are that we did the Didi crackdown. China's internet regulator says, this is totally related to the Didi crackdown and the aftermath of it, that China's internet regulator says any Chinese company with data for more than 1 million users must undergo a security review before listing its shares overseas. Security review of your data. So we make sure, China, you got to hand it to China. They definitely understand the power of data. Other big headlines today: inside Simulation City, Waymo's latest virtual world in which it trains, tests, and validates its Waymo driver, which is an algorithm, it's not a person. It's Waymo driver software in preparation for open roads. And this leads to a conversation we've had now a couple times very recently about Waymo operates as a self-driving taxi service in some very predefined areas under predefined conditions, meaning it won't operate in the rain, it doesn't operate in the snow. It operates in situations that it knows it can operate safely, given the technology that it has. But that self-driving pizza delivery, food delivery, even people delivery can happen in certain cities where the roads are flat with nicely painted lines with very clear stop signs and all of these types of things. And that's why certain cities are being chosen over others. By the way, Waymo will not be operating in Ho Chi Minh City in our lifetime, because that some Southeast Asian cities are absolutely mind-blowingly chaotic but in a beautiful way, and that would drive these cars crazy. And I saw a hilarious video of a Tesla trying to drive through Ho Chi Minh City, which, similar to some cities in India and around Southeast Asia, where you come into these intersections where it's 10 roads all merging simultaneously in an absolute beautiful cacophony of madness. And the self-driving Tesla literally started flashing red on the dash, take the wheel, take the wheel, take the wheel. And the car just came to a stop, because it's going to be a long while before an autonomous
well, speaking of
that's really funny. Hang on, Dan, 1 second. That's really funny. We have here in Oxford a company called Oxbotica, which is like a autonomous. It's a driving kind of startup, and they're using it in all kinds of different places now. There's a professor here who started that, and they have these cars driving around, autonomous cars now in Oxford, right? And they do similar things with the cyclists, which is why I have this observational thing around cyclists, right? Because there's a lot of cyclists here, and they literally just stop, like in the middle of the road. They just stop, and it's like everyone's beeping, and they're just like, and of course they have a driver in there because they're just collecting data and stuff, and then and the driver's trying not to intervene and get it going again. But it's quite hilarious when you see these cars operate in a lot of human-based systems, with lots of humans around. Anyway, sorry, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, well, speaking of all of that, the version 9 of the full self-driving was released to the beta testers, so it's a relatively small group, and the first videos are being posted now. And one was someone driving through the fog. I think it was San Francisco or around here, driving through fog, and it did a fantastic job. You got the feeling it was doing a better job than you would have done in the fog. And also, people are commenting on how it can do roundabouts now and much better than before. It's driving much more confident. So it is making progress. The whole thing is supposed to be released to everyone in a month or so. But of course, they've said that a few times. But it is out now, and the 1,000 people or whatever number it is right now, are trying it out. And so far, pretty impressive results.
Yeah, that's the benefit of the camera system that Dan's referring to, is it can drive in situations that radar would, Waymo's not going to be operating. If there is fog, they'll just ground the vehicles while the fog is happening. That's why they're testing it in Phoenix, which has doesn't have fog or rain generally, and it's why they even say in this article that they just tweeted out, but they names why the challenge of even operating in San Francisco. It'll be a while before they even attempt to do this in San Francisco, but Phoenix makes a lot of sense. Now we understand why.
My question there, Tyler, quickly is, okay, I understand Phoenix, I understand San Francisco. What about regions like Boston and the northeastern part of the United States with blizzards?
Not going to happen. Well, you won't see. Waymo's going to focus on the areas where, like I said, where it's the friendliest to
exactly
the easiest areas first, right? But Tesla is taking a totally different approach, which is humans are going to stay in the cars. The cars are going to continue to get smarter and smarter and smarter, and we want cars driving on as many roads as possible with as many drivers as possible, because we're going to take all of that data and learning data and add it to our models, and all of that every mile driven is useful in improving the algorithms. And which one do you think is going to learn faster? The Waymo approach of starting in safe areas and then eventually getting to busy cities, or the Tesla approach of keeping people in the cars, sitting in the seat, until eventually less and less of that driver's attention is needed. And eventually,
I don't mean to go off on a tangent here, but I'll just quickly add a point, right? We still have people that love horses.
Yep.
And love riding horses, right?
Yep.
In the same way, I still feel in the long term, and I feel there'll be not a minority population, there will be a significant population of gas guzzlers, machine lovers, who will be loving those cars, who will be loving the sports cars, who will be loving the speed of the thrill of speed, whether it be electric or whether it be whatnot, where autonomous might be a portion, but not significant. And that's just my personal opinion. I may very well be wrong.
But here, the point
I think it's going to be maybe a percentage-wise might be a smaller percentage of cars that in existence, but passenger miles will be the vast majority because it'll be just far cheaper. I mean, because economics. There will be, as you said, people with sports cars that love to drive them like horses. People on horses, but to get from here to there, it'll be cheaper and easier just to take the EV, the autonomous EV.
Yeah, but
most of the world isn't as developed as the United States.
Right, but the horses are now being, have a limited area within which they're able to operate, where in the past they could pretty much go anywhere unregulated, and now it's very regulated where horses are allowed to go. Gas cars will be the same. Gas cars will only be allowed in certain areas because they're not as safe, they pollute the environment, and all on and on and on and on and on. So it'll become, just like horses, a luxury that you can afford to pay the incredibly high insurance of having a human navigated car, which is much more prone to accidents and polluting the environment and all these other things. So
I'll only continue on this if you want me, let me, Tyler, but I don't want to
I want to go to the next topic.
Actually, I'll shut up. Tyler, this is Shaheen. I just want to make one quick comment. The brilliance of Tesla's model is that they effectively get paid collecting data.
Right.
And collection of data is a very expensive thing.
Correct.
As Ford and Waymo and Toyota and others are learning.
Smart.
So this is really, really smart.
It is. Great point.
Charge you $10,000 for the privilege of doing that. So pretty cool.
They really should be paying you.
We are subsidizing Tesla's development of their eventual autonomous delivery system. Yes.
We subsidize them in every step of the value chain.
Correct.
And that's brilliant.
It is. This Elon guy, people say he's not smart. I disagree. I think he might actually be a clever individual, this Elon guy. So New York City's new biometrics privacy law takes effect, barring businesses from selling customer data and requiring posted notices at their doors about data collection. Oh, that's interesting. So if you have, if you're collecting any kind of customer data, you must notify them as they enter the door. The question is, what size font? Because just like user license agreements on apps, essentially, people are agreeing to all kinds of data collection when they use an app. And now they'll do the same when they walk into Starbucks. And Starbucks will have a micro font warning as at the handle of every door that says, your face is being recorded and used, and your voice is being recorded and used, and everything you ordered, your purchase history here is being. By the way, every supermarket has data about everything you've ever bought there. In fact, my uncle pioneered that with Safeway, initially with Vons, actually in the 80s, through the loyalty program, which has now become an industry standard everywhere. It's an ad network. They sell the data of what popcorn brand you bought is being sold to the other brand, and the peanut butter you bought is being sold to the competing peanut butter brands to advertise to you. And that is your user data. So now every supermarket's going to have to notify you that they are collecting and selling your user data. Well, okay, fine. By the way, lots of companies are doing this. Cal could probably tell you the ways in which Best Buy is collecting different user data, but in the way that this is worded, the New York City's it says biometrics, so that seems to imply face, fingerprint, maybe voice. Biometrics privacy law to take effect, barring businesses from selling customer data, which is what supermarkets do. They're selling your customer data, although it's not really biometric, although the really new supermarkets do have biometric data. They are recording your face from the cameras everywhere, and they are using that data, although they might not be selling it. But it says barring businesses from selling customer data and requiring posted notices at their doors about the data collection. A new biometric privacy ordinance has taken effect across New York City, putting new limits on what businesses can do with the biometric data they collect on their customers from Friday, which was a couple days ago. Businesses that collect biometric information, most commonly in the form of facial recognition and fingerprints, are required to conspicuously post notices and signs to customers at their doors explaining how their data will be collected.
Hey, Tyler, can I inject here? Because
Yeah.
I used to, when I was younger, work for the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs that actually used to enforce those specific laws about signage for consumers.
Yes.
So you're actually right. We actually have in New York City, even though I haven't worked in New York City government in this field for a couple of decades, I will tell you that they actually did have rules that regarding the fonts, regarding how the sign has to look. And one of the reasons wasn't just to help the consumer, was because it was a way of raising money. Because if the sign was technically wrong or the sign wasn't there, they get a fine.
Right.
So the New York City Department of Consumer Affairs is one of the few self-funding agencies in New York City, meaning it makes more money from fines than it costs to have all the employees. So I'll just leave you
it's like
with that note.
the new parking meter. Yeah. It's kind of
a separate one on this, Tyler, that I saw, which was in my humble opinion the most evil one that I have ever seen. And I think you might have seen it, and I posted it, but a whole bunch of other people saw it. I don't know if you saw it, which is Tencent using facial recognition for bedtime for children.
Yes, that's the video games one. Let's hold that thought. That's a great one. It says here in the article that businesses can face stiff penalties for violating the law, but can escape fines if they fix the violation quickly. Exactly to Ken's point, which is this is really about New York. This agency found a new way to kind of add a new revenue stream, essentially. Businesses face stiff penalties, and the law is by no means perfect, as none of these laws ever are. For one, it doesn't apply to government agencies, including the police. Of the businesses that the ordinance does cover, it exempts employees of those businesses, such as those required to clock in and out with a fingerprint, and the definition of what counts as biometric will likely face challenges that could expand or narrow what is covered. And I think it's not a coincidence that New York is the first to do this, because it's based. Here's a quote: "A false facial recognition match could mean having the NYPD called on you just for walking into a Rite Aid or Target," he told TechCrunch. He also said that New York should go further by outlawing systems like facial recognition altogether, as some cities have done. Albert Fox-Conn, the executive director of New York's Surveillance Technology Oversight Project, said that the law is an important step to learn how New Yorkers are tracked by local businesses. Interesting. But to your point, for us, go ahead, Ken.
Tyler, to tie this back to something else you mentioned, seriously, about horses, it ties back. The New York City Department of Consumer Affairs, the same department that will have jurisdiction over these signs. When I was still there in the 1980s, we still had rules about how you had to tie up your horse on the post, even though no one had horses anymore. And we finally got rid of the rules on how you had to tie up your horses in the 1980s, but we still also had rules governing the transportation of horse manure in New York City. I think that's still on the books, by the way. So,
yep. So Faraz brought up a great point of a headline we had a few days ago, that Tencent, which is one of the big tech giants in China, and also one of the biggest investors in video games globally, has now, because of their, and they dominate video games within China. So, and they have dozens of titles, including all the most popular titles.
Are those video games allowed to be downloaded in the United States, Tyler?
Yes, many of them are.
Okay, so
and they're also invested in many.
They're
also a key investor in many of the biggest video games. They're also a big investor in Spotify. They're a massive investor in tech globally.
Which means data from those video games is not hosted in the United States. It's hosted in China somewhere.
Safe to assume. Yeah.
And which means that the United States legislation does not have control on where that data is managed, and hence they cannot stop facial recognition.
Let's focus on your main point, which is a great point, which is China's now requiring the users of their video games to and there's a new agree to button when you now have the newest versions of these games that says that the app is able to use facial recognition even on minors, because what they're aiming to do is reduce video game usage by minors after 9 p.m. so that you're not playing video games into the night, because that's not productive to society. So the state has now required by the way, what's interesting about this is who actually cares if you're playing the video game or not. Tencent would love you to play the video game all throughout the night. I mean, that's kind of core to their business. China, the state, doesn't want its citizens playing video games all throughout the night. So who's actually driving the ship here, enforcing this new facial recognition, which is going to stop people, I think it was people under the age of 16, from playing games past 9 p.m., if I remember correctly, because it was 4 or 5 days ago that we read the headline. But it's, facial recognition being used as a policing tactic to change social behaviors in a really interesting way.
I think Faraz didn't know he has a hot mic. Faraz, you're dragging your feet while walking.
That's right.
Sorry.
But yeah, that article is a super, super, super interesting, because we might not be far off. Again, China's really fascinating to watch because they tend to do things first because they can do it very quickly. And other countries are likely to, just like when we look at how China dealt with the social media apps, and now other countries are just starting to do the same years later. When China's doing this, it might not be that far off that other countries are going to say, hey, we want to be able to, we don't want people using these apps in these ways. And because data might show, and this is where it's going to get really wild, and people can come up with all kinds of interesting scenarios. By the way, somewhat related, Pinterest is in the news, one of the top 10 stories today. Pinterest wants in on the creator economy. Oh, really? What a surprise. I'm so shocked. Another social app trying to monetize through e-commerce. Oh, sorry. I wanted the cash register. So that the actual headline is Pinterest wants in on the creator economy. Whoever could have predicted this? Can it do it in the Pinterest way? Fewer likes and dance trends, more cookie baking and outfit inspirations, and ideally a much nicer place to be. And here it is. It says most of Pinterest's best-known creators didn't start using Pinterest as creators. In fact, most of them started using the platform well before the phrase Pinterest creator was even a thing. They simply did what everyone else did, pin stuff that they like and create boards and use platforms, etc. And in recent years, though, as Pinterest grew, it began to want to bring more of the content on the platform itself. Meanwhile, the creator economy is booming on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and practically every other entertainment and social company are looking for ways to help creators build audiences and businesses on their platforms. Pinterest has always seen itself as something different from those apps, though, and so has largely stayed out of the fray. But then Pinterest noticed something changing. When we had talked to users of Pinterest, we'd say, "What's the most inspiring thing to you?" The company's product chief said. They'd reply with a person. My mom is really inspiring. This public figure is inspiring. While there were plenty of ideas all over Pinterest, there were no people behind them. In the time when authentic human connection is everything, too many Pinterest searches felt like faceless catalogs. So over the years, Pinterest has dived headfirst into the world of creators. It introduced a feature called Story Pins, which allows users to make Pinterest native stories. Blah, blah, blah. In all, the company is hoping it can help you usher in a new generation of Pinterest users, or pinners, as the company calls them, who do much more than save pictures and recipes, but as usual, it's hoping to build a creator economy in a slightly different way. The secret magic of Pinterest is being able to inspire people to take action. For creators, that meant thinking slightly differently about what they share. And my God, this journalist is really hiding the juicy bit of this article. But needless to say, Pinterest is, as I said, wants to monetize, because if they don't, and this is the big takeaway, is there's now a big competition between all of the social apps, including Pinterest, where creators are going to spend their time wherever they're able to monetize most. That's the hot, new, crazy competition that is just beginning now. And it will be YouTube versus TikTok versus Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. And Pinterest needs to get in this game, or people are not going to be spending as much time in Pinterest as they used to, because as the apps e-commerceify, the uncommercified apps are going to become creative wastelands, essentially.
Tyler, this is Michelle speaking.
Hey,
I was
Michelle.
just going to add that I'm actually pretty surprised that Pinterest wasn't the first mover in that space, because it's such a shoppable interface.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that they finally making that move.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what's the strategy been internally for them not to have even been pioneer, because they could have gone into shopping even a couple of years ago. So.
Yep.
I wonder if the existence of Etsy put them off, because that's kind of what it would look like, wouldn't it, if Pinterest went into that space?
Well, you could find all kinds of... Pinterest is based off of, you find lots of beautiful things and you essentially make a Twitter feed of images of things that you think other people will find interesting. You're making boards of pinned boards of content.
Tyler?
Yes?
When it comes to Pinterest, the unique part about what you just said about that big juicy sales that could come from Pinterest.
Yeah.
Oh my God, so many women I know will use Pinterest to prepare what they want to buy. Like, let's say they're redoing a room, or maybe they're redoing a bathroom, or maybe they're doing a christening or a wedding, and they're going to look for boards that align with some sort of like a concept board of what they're looking for and products and all that other stuff. Can you imagine the money that could be made in Pinterest, because it makes it easier for me to just buy from the board?
Huge.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
It's huge.
I think it's game changing for the whole social commerce, because you not only have like women, but you have interior designers, you have contractors, you have, office decorators, you have a lot of different people that go into Pinterest, just normal day to day, that want to do their gardens, so there's...
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was saying, that I am actually very surprised they haven't made, because people go there with a high shoppable intent and they search what they're looking for.
Yep.
And they're usually kind of ready to buy. So, I mean, I'm glad that they're finally making that move.
I'm very excited that they are, because that makes it easier to shop in some ways, Michelle, because I'm also surprised they didn't move on to this sooner. But I don't think that they were looking at it, because they are a bit of like, you do mood boards and you do concept boards. But I think as someone that works in creative or has done a studio design, it's very easy to make it available to them to access those vendors, so that they don't have to go searching for them. Because that was my biggest complaint, is that every time I went to make my boards, it was hard to find where I could buy that specific product, and it made me disappointed when I couldn't find it. So to Michelle's point, I'm grateful that they're doing it, because I think they're gonna surprise everyone.
Yeah, and I just don't know who they believe their core user to be. So I've not used it. I've known of people who have, but my perception is that their core customer were scrapbookers. These women that would go and spend, $100 or $200 at Michael's to make a scrap board, photo album. And so I just would be really curious to talk with some people within Pinterest to get an understanding of who their core user. They were probably thinking more so of users rather than customers, because it is a no-brainer, as I listen to both you and Michelle. But I just don't think that they considered the full possibilities, the full range of possibilities.
That's super fascinating that you said that, because there's three initial word that comes up when you were just saying what you said. It's the DIYers. And the DIYers are in Pinterest a lot. They're the people that want to cut out the middleman generically, because they want to do the stuff themselves. And if you imagine someone being able to do something themselves, it would actually allow them to just do their plan, get it done and dusted. And they're the DIY folks. They're the people
Yeah,
that
and they
like
would look
doing
for
that.
recipes. I mean,
Yeah,
it
totally.
was just a completely different kind of person. When I've redecorated houses or rooms, I would use House, but it's certainly not to the same scale. But I could do what Pinterest users do, but they started to sell, but it just wasn't a great user interface. But I think that the people at House were really starting to think of their users as potential customers
Yeah.
through some form of commerce.
Hey, Tyler,
Yep.
this is Jay. I'm an ex Pinterest person, so I used to work there. So they actually did have the buy button before they IPO'd. I think it was more or less dealing with the merchants, which was the issue, and that's why we saw it briefly. And a lot of users, we actually A/B tested it. It worked, but I think it was way ahead of what everyone
Yeah.
else was doing. Now,
Yeah.
for the target users that people are talking about, it's actually mothers, surprisingly, which shouldn't
Yeah.
actually even be surprising because they're mostly stay-at-home mothers, do DIYs, and those are mostly the target users in general that use Pinterest.
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift internally as well that they have to navigate very carefully in steps and optimize, and it takes time. And the pipes themselves are developing, and it could be that some of the critical pieces that enable this, like image recognition of knowing what, in the case of Instagram, as Michelle knows, Instagram, when there's an image and somebody's wearing some red, Converse All Stars, the algorithm can detect that those are red high top Converse All Stars, but here's other shoes that look very similar to it that maybe they're not Converse All Stars, maybe they are Comme des Garçons, version of Converse All Stars, which are real,
Tyler,
by the way.
you
So
just said a very sorry.
yeah, but you see what
You
I
just
mean is sometimes there
yeah.
are shoes that look a lot alike, and you're actually very specifically want the Comme des Garçons version of the red high top All Stars, not the OG version of Converse red high top All Stars. And so that's where they do recommend both. In the case of Instagram, they're going to say, we think it's this image, this product, but here's 4 other products that it might be. Please tell us which of these it is. And that's based on the most cutting edge of machine learning algorithms, which Pinterest, that is difficult team you have to develop internally to enable that, or find some service that allows you to add those APIs to your app. Amy?
Tyler, there is an app that I've seen because, I've obviously been someone on TikTok. There is an app called ClipDrop. There are some fashion apps and clothing apps that will take a photo and actually pull the photo in, like, using AI, using technology to take a photo of something you like. And then it allows it to sort of clear it up. And I believe you could do a reverse image search or an image search on Google to find the actual product, which is really fascinating because it means if I like your sneakers, I could take a picture of your sneakers. It'll take out the background. And then from there, it'll allow me to use the photo as a reverse image search in Google and actually locate where that product would be. And I think that technology is going to come forward a little bit more. I think it's going to become faster to develop that technology because it's going to make it easier for the consumer to locate a product anywhere, anytime. And that, from a one point of inventory perspective, that makes it very easy to appeal to the customer that wants the Comme des Garçons sneakers and doesn't want to sort of have to worry about finding where they are. But they could just take a picture of them, and then by the grace of God of the universe and the internet and the whole AI, they will be able to be tracked where that shoe is and where they could purchase it from.
Okay.
I think the
Jay?
opportunity here, if I can just quickly add to that, is bringing it where you already have billions of human beings. I guess the opportunity is not the tech ability to create such feature, so because those users are already in those platforms, and you don't need to leave the app to go search it elsewhere and so on.
So I wanted
Jay,
to.
I just want to thank you just for that insight
Mm-hmm.
because as I listened to you and you spoke to the mothers, to stay at home moms being the target customer, I think of the US retailer Target who have cornered, the stay at home mom or really the female consumer in general who might go to buy a roll of paper towels and then she walks out with $150 worth of things that she didn't realize that she needed. So, I think that the potential is huge, and it'd just be really interesting to see what happens with Pinterest in this new space.
Yeah, let's just say they just made a lot of poor decisions. And what Ami actually mentioned, we actually had that technology when I was there in 2016 of actually taking a photo and just actually buying like what you search off a photo. But like I said, there are a lot of merchant issues. It was way ahead of its time, and it's unfortunate to see what's happened.
So there's a new AI update within the voice AI space. I'm going to play it for you. And it says AI voice actors sound more human than ever, like Siri, like Google Assistant, like Alexa. But there's other startups that are even making further advancements than them. A new wave of startups are using deep learning to build synthetic voice actors for digital assistants, video game characters, corporate videos, maybe even Clubhouse. So listen to this audio of this new voice. Editor at MIT Technology Review, covering the field's cutting-edge research and its impacts on society. She writes a weekly newsletter called The Algorithm, which was named one of the best newsletters on the internet in 2019 by the Webby Awards. Her work has also won a front page award and been shortlisted for the Sigma and Ambies Awards. Prior to joining the publication, she was a tech reporter and data scientist at Quartz. Holy shit. It's getting really good.
He sounds really real, but very fake. Like, I wouldn't want to have a beer with him like I want to have with you, Tyler.
Okay.
I really thought it was Johan. I was looking for Johan.
Yeah, Johan does sound like a robot. Johan, any comments?
Oh, thank you very much.
Hey, Tyler, you should mention the significant union issues that were already mentioned in this article, because I just glanced at it, but I already knew, because I've been in Hollywood, I know so many people there, that this is going to be a big issue with voiceover actors. A lot of people who make a living off this.
Yeah, it says the company's blog post, and by the way, they have a SoundCloud account. I'm going to tweet out right now the link to the article, which includes a link to their SoundCloud account where they've got multiple recordings of their voices. I just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. You can see in my photo the letters TNATW. It says the company blog post drips with the enthusiasm of a 90s US infomercial. It's called Well Said Labs, describes what clients can expect from its 8 new digital voice actors. Tobin is energetic and insightful. Paige is poised and expressive. Ava is polished, self-assured, and professional. Each one is based on a real voice actor whose likeness, with consent, has been preserved using AI. So essentially, they can take a person's voice and synthesize it so it can say anything. So you can give it a text script, and now that human voice-based synthesized voice, which, by the way, this is how synthesizers do violins as well, as they record a little bit of a violin, and then they extrapolate all of the different notes on a keyboard to represent that violin. This is a similar thing, but they're doing it with voice and words. So each voice is based on a real voice, and companies can now license these voices to say whatever they need. They simply feed some text into the voice engine, and out will spool a crisp audio clip of natural sounding performance. Well Said Labs, a Seattle-based startup that spun out of a research nonprofit, Allen Institute of AI, is the latest firm offering AI voices to clients. For now, it specializes in voices for corporate e-learning videos. Other startups make voices for digital assistants, call center operators, even video game characters. And get ready for the deepfakes, because you can use pre-recorded audio of a celebrity from a movie or a podcast or whatever to make one of these voice actors. And once you have enough audio, and it doesn't take a lot, I could clone Cal or anybody else. It would be very interesting. And, the progress that's being made on this is being made on a weekly or monthly basis. Within a few years, the deep fakes are going to get very hard to detect indeed, especially if you're doing, Bob Marley, Bob Dylan, or you pick any actor or celebrity of any kind, Obama, Trump, or what have you. It's going to get very dystopian very quickly.
And they're kind of doing this with the kids. Like, if you sign up for Nickelodeon's birthday club, Paw Patrol will call you on your birthday with a personalized message. Can you imagine if you're part of Taylor Swift's fan club and she not only calls you but says, "Hey, how did those shoes that you ordered off of the social commerce app fit last time?"
Because your parents put in that script. Yeah. By the way, I did a startup back in 2006-ish of Santa calling people, and it was actual real people calling. You could have Santa call your kid at a preset time, and it was God, what was the name of that startup? But we branched off into other things, and it works. It's really interesting, but now you could fully automate that, and the parents could write Santa's script. And I might have to do that this Christmas again with a new form of Santa. Anyway, really interesting. Santa's safe because nobody owns Santa's likeness. That's the beautiful part about doing Santa.
Just quickly on this, it's worth stating that it doesn't have to be a company. So we're talking about deepfakes, for instance, and the legal ramifications that are going to come from that. But it doesn't even have to be a company that's designing an app to deepfake people, as in it could, when we get to the point where we have really, really good apps or sort of algorithms that you can say, okay, I need a voice. I want it to be American. Now make it deeper. Now make the sort of the pronunciation harder, etc., etc. in a really nice intuitive UI where you could just build your own voice and your own character. So it's not designed to deepfake, but it just gives all the tools to a user in an easy sort of to use interface, and then that user can happenstance, keep hitting the randomize button and end up with Taylor Swift accidentally, or can sit there and tweak it until it sounds like Taylor Swift, so the company's not doing it then. And we've already had this problem in video gaming where you've got character creation systems, for instance, that have been so comprehensive that you can make Marvel characters and Disney characters, and then they become really, really popular, and the news picks up on it and whatnot, and the companies find out, and they're like, hey, hold on a minute. You might not be building Marvel characters, but you're putting all the stuff in there so your users can build Marvel characters. This ain't fair. You've got to cut that out. So I think we're going to see that a little bit as these tools become more available to the average user.
We had a headline recently, 2-3 weeks ago, of a voice actor that had been sampled from a video game, because in video games today, once the video game ends, the fans of the video game continue to make additional levels of the game for the other users. This is a very common aspect of video games. And so somebody made a very realistic extra level of the game by taking the voices from the original part of the game and knew how to extract the voices and use those voice synthesizers to create additional levels with entirely new scripts, but with the same voice. And so the voice actor who did the original scenes was like, hey, you didn't call me or pay me to make additional scenes of this video game. And he's like, yeah, I didn't need to. I just synthesized your voice. So it gets very interesting very quickly. It's already happening. Yeah. So I want to just run through, because we have 4 minutes remaining here, the best tweets that I found recently. Although, my God, thank you to everyone who sent in hundreds and hundreds of tweets since we met 24 hours ago. There's a recycling app that uses AI to identify trash. And then the new app will use AI to help Australians work out if their rubbish can be recycled. It's called RecycleMate. It's designed to help people become better recyclers. And then Cal had one just recently about Biden is also backing Trump's rejection of China's South China Sea claims. And along with the rest of the world, it should be said. The Biden administration on Sunday upheld Trump-era rejection of nearly all of China's sufficient maritime claims in the South China Sea. That's a huge, 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 huge issue, and likely, if any, of the top 10 things, of the top 3 things that could trigger the next World War. That's certainly very high on the list. And software firm Onboard lands $100 million from to create a virtual board company, essentially. Indianapolis-based Onboard operates a board management platform used by more than 12,000 boards. Announced Wednesday it had secured $100 million focused on cloud software to enable companies to be governed and have their boards remotely. And this is an important reason I mentioned this very boring startup, is because it's actually a very important link in the chain of everyone becoming untethered geographically, is because it's one of the last pieces where boards still feel the need to fly together to have their board meetings. And that's one of the frictions of companies becoming truly international and decentralized. And so this $100 million for this company called Onboard is really quite interesting. As the article says, boards do some of the most important work. They're leading the organizations. This will allow us to think holistically about continuing to invest in boards and creating an experience that allows them to do their best work remotely, which is true. This is fantastic, and it's an important piece of the puzzle. Taiwan, Foxconn, TSMC Inc., a $350 million deal for COVID vaccines, which is great. I'll leave that. Enough said there.
Tyler,
yes.
This is the biggest news, seriously. Okay, so just pay attention to it. Okay. Taiwan government has tried for months to buy the vaccine directly from BioNTech, and has blamed China for it. So we've been discussing that particular topic for ages. Now, look at it from the different perspective that, Foxconn and TSMC has actually gone and closed the deal. Now, look
thank you for helping me figure that out. Yeah.
So it's a big news that, the political government couldn't actually do it, but here we go.
Funny.
The tech giants have got the leverage to
funny.
go and do it.
You're right. So what?
It's
can I just remind everyone? Actually, the chairman of Foxconn did try to run for Taiwanese presidency before.
Funny.
Unsuccessfully.
That's funny. Yeah. That's really funny because there's an agreement that the vaccine companies make that are geographically specific, which says, in this country they have exclusive on buying it and whatever, but it's related to countries and governments, and so a private third party could make a purchase. It's really interesting. Kind of a hack, kind of a workaround. Anyway, thank you for the insight on that. Who is this writing this one? Financial Times has a headline that Chinese investors miss out on a record year for Indian tech fundraising. From Financial Times, Indian startups raised a record $7.2 billion across 336 funding rounds in the quarter ending June, according to data provider Traxon. And high-tech toilets could spread antibiotic-resistant superbugs in hospitals, Japanese study says, coming from Heyman. Yeah, what is it with Heyman and toilet articles? Something is stinky with Heyman and all of his toilet articles.
Can I give the littlest backstory here?
Yeah.
I've hung out with Heyman like late night, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of like the different toilets, which ones are high-end, which ones are luxury. So you're onto something, Tyler.
I'm not. Is he not here? Ladies and gentlemen, let's figure out what's going on with Heyman and toilets. It's
4 a.m. in Toronto, so hopefully he's sleeping.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to create a room on that sometime when he's awake.
That's the title of the room?
We can all discuss this.
What's up with Heyman?
I don't know
toilets?
the title yet,
yes.
but anybody have a suggestion, just DM me.
Yeah.
And we'll just set up a room. We'll just get Heyman in there. It's time we set up maybe an MBA one. We study this phenomena.
Yep.
Maybe we this is deep.
Maybe the MBA of poop.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Why Biden's Forbes has an article. The headline is "Why Biden's War on Big Tech is Misguided." It's a very long read, so I'll let you read it from the Tech News Twitter account. Reuters has a report that Dubai's ruler launches big tech companies a national program for coders, which they should do. That is fantastic. That's what they need, because there is a recipe to build a vibrant tech ecosystem. And one of the key ingredients in a recipe of having a strong startup ecosystem is people who can code and build apps. And you need developers, as our friend Jeff from Microsoft used to say. So Dubai understands it needs coders, because I've told Dubai in 2013 they need coders if they want to be a serious tech ecosystem. And so I'm very happy to see this article that Dubai's ruler is launching this initiative to build more a program for coders. That's what they need, indeed. China wants to build an 8,000-mile underwater train. China currently has one of the most expansive and impressive high-speed rail networks on Earth. And this article that I'm just retweeting now says China wants to build an underwater link to the U.S. Fantastic. A 13,000-kilometer, 8,000-mile train that travels from mainland China up through Siberia and eastern Russia, under the sea, through the Bering Strait into Alaska, across the rocky peaks of Canada's Yukon into the USA. Once constructed, they could further extend the international bullet train into every corner of the U.S. The price of such outlandish proposal is a cool $200 billion. And the plans emerged in 2014, and you can read all about it because we're short on time, so I'm just going to keep chugging along, no pun intended. And the next one is that there's a big article from Wired highlighting how Chinese politicians use Twitter in a very kind of aggressive way, which they state is intended for their home audience, because once they say something very loudly and proudly on Twitter, it's then screenshotted and quickly shared internally in China, where their local folks are very happy to see how their politicians are standing up to and who they perceive as political foes of some kind. It's a really interesting article. It's become one of the biggest articles of the week on shared on Twitter. Tech firms to buy COVID-19 vaccines on behalf of Taiwan's government. We covered that one. Heyman sent in that one as well. And with 17,000 locations, Dollar General, I didn't realize they had 17,000 locations. That's a lot of locations. Could help rural America, where they're located, and low-income communities get vaccinated. In fact, distributing vaccines through Dollar General was something the U.S. Center for Disease Control considered as well, and now Bloomberg is talking about it. And more, it highlights the point that brick and mortar will likely play a significant role in distribution of all kinds of things in addition to vaccines. So Amazon would do a deal with Dollar General to now have 17,000 pickup and drop off and return locations. You get the idea. Or clinics or what have you. So physical locations will end up being useful in some sense. All-in-one doctor startup Coda reaches $1.4 billion valuation in India, and medtech in India is booming. Yeah, no doubt. Makes perfect sense. Virtual reality headset maker Oculus announces new ways to make VR more inclusive in a new software update. With V30, we're adding some long-awaited features, including microphone swapping, a more powerful multitasking experience for people who love to use every inch of their digital space, etc. And it's an even bigger update for owners of the original Quest who can enable AirLink. And the marquee change in this update is the inclusion of a new accessibility tab in the Oculus settings. This is where users can perform such actions as changing the default text size. So as old geezers who need glasses can now use VR and actually read the text by increasing the default text size. Oculus has added 2 features: color correction and raise view, etc. So now more people can enjoy the VR experience. And there's a headline that I'm retweeting right now. Can advertising scale in VR? And this is a huge, huge question. And the answer is yes, because there's billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to be made of bringing advertising into VR and e-commerce into VR. And that's why you don't even need to think about it too hard. Indeed, e-commerce and advertising will come into VR because there's way too many billions of dollars at stake. And Apple's VR headset might prevent crashing into furniture is a headline as well that I'm sharing right now from the Twitter account. And you have to click on it to see it, how they will help you prevent yourself from crashing into all the furniture in your own house. And I will pause there and save all of the other 500 fantastic articles that people tweeted in, even while we met here and didn't have a chance to cover, because, as I said, I have a hard headline that I'm now 7 minutes over. So I'll have to bid you all adieu until we meet again in 6 hours. But thank you to everybody for joining us yet again.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you